Craig Marshall was having the worst day of his life. His car broke down on a deserted stretch of highway, his phone died, and now it was starting to rain. He trudged along the road, thumb half-heartedly extended, when the clouds above him parted in a way clouds absolutely should not. A brilliant blue light enveloped him, and Craig felt his feet leave the ground. "Oh, come on," he muttered as his body rose skyward. "This day just keeps getting better." The last thing Craig remembered before losing consciousness was the underside of what appeared to be an enormous metal disc, and the strange thought of iridescent skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Their elongated heads housed 3 eyes, 2 on the sides and 1 in the center of what passed for a forehead. "The specimen is conscious," announced one of the creatures in a voice that sounded like several wind chimes being dragged across a chalkboard. Craig winced. The specimen would appreciate being called by his name. "It's Craig. Craig Marshall." He attempted to stand but discovered his limbs felt unusually heavy. The aliens exchanged glances, their skin rippling from blue to a concerned purple. "The gravity settings are optimized for Zalarian physiology," explained in his surroundings. The chamber was vast, curved walls lined with technology that pulsed and blinked in patterns that made his eyes hurt if he looked too long. 10,000 cycles, explained the leader as they led Craig down the corridor. Each is designed to test qualities essential for rulership. Wisdom, courage, judgment, compassion. Craig stumbled along, the robe trailing behind him. "And what happens if I fail these trials?" The aliens exchanged glances, their skin briefly flashing a deep crimson before returning to blue. "That," said the leader carefully, "has never been an issue worth discussing." "That's not ominous at all," muttered Craig. They entered a vast chamber where hundreds of Xylarians stood in concentric circles around a central platform. A hush fell over the crowd as Craig was led to the center. Their collective skin tones shifted in waves of anticipation. Blues, purples, and excited flashes of gold rippled through the assembly. The leader raised its long, 7-fingered hands. The first trial shrugged. "Well, I'm not getting much from just looking at it." Before anyone could stop him, he reached out and placed his hand on the cube. The chamber erupted in chaos. The cube glowed brilliantly, projecting images and symbols that filled the air around Craig. He felt a strange connection forming, as if the device was attempting to communicate directly with his mind. It's some kind of communication device," Craig said, concentrating on the sensations flowing through him. "No, more than that. It's storing information, experiences. It's like a combination of a computer, a library, and social media." The Xylarians froze, their skin pale with shock. "You speak of the unspeakable," the leader finally managed. "The thought matrix contains the collective consciousness of all Xylarians who have ever lived. It is our repository of wisdom, our connection to each other. No outsider has ever comprehended its nature so quickly." Craig removed his hand from the cube, the glow fading. "So, it's basically alien Facebook with extra steps." "Got it." The leader's skin cycled through several colors before settling on a perplexed lavender. "The human has passed the first trial," it announced, sounding somewhat bewildered. The assembly pulsed with excited colors, and a murmur ran through the crowd. Craig couldn't tell if they were impressed or disturbed, but he was already being led toward another door. "The second trial awaits," declared the leader. The trial of courage. Craig was escorted to what appeared to be an arena with high walls of a translucent material that shifted and rippled like the surface of water. In the center stood a pedestal holding what looked like a twisted metal rod. "You must retrieve the scepter of authority," explained the leader, gesturing to the rod, while facing the guardian. Before Craig could ask what the guardian was, a section of the floor slid open. From the darkness below emerged a creature that defied Craig's understanding of biology. It resembled a cross between a mantis and a jellyfish, standing nearly 12 feet tall. Its translucent body pulsed with bioluminescent organs, and multiple limbs ended in what appeared to be very sharp points. Craig took a step back. That's the Guardian, I'm guessing? The Kael'thax has protected the scepter for millennia, the leader confirmed. It can sense fear and hesitation. Only the worthy may approach. The creature swayed menacingly, its limbs creating a whistling sound as they cut through the air. The Xylarians watched expectantly from behind the safety of the barrier. Craig assessed the situation. The creature was positioned between him and the scepter, its multiple eyes tracking his movements. There was no way he could outrun or overpower it. Is there some special technique for dealing with this thing? Craig asked. The worthy know the way, replied the leader cryptically. Craig sighed. Super helpful, thanks. He took a cautious step forward. The Guardian responded immediately, its limbs extending in a threatening display. Craig froze, his mind racing. Then he noticed something odd. The creature's movements seemed almost rhythmic, responding to his own. An idea struck him. Craig began to step deliberately, moving in a slow, steady pattern. The Guardian's movements altered, becoming less aggressive and more synchronized with his own. It was responding to his rhythm. It's reading my body language, Craig muttered. It's not just sensing fear, it's mirroring intention. With this realization, Craig changed his approach. Instead of trying to reach the scepter directly, he began walking in a circular pattern around the arena, maintaining consistent, calm movements. The Guardian tracked him but didn't attack, its limbs swaying in time with his steps. Gradually, Craig spiraled closer to the center, moving with deliberate confidence. The Guardian continued to mirror him rather than threaten. When he finally reached the pedestal, he maintained his rhythmic movement as he reached for the scepter. The moment his fingers closed around the rod, the Guardian retracted its limbs and bowed its amorphous head in what appeared to be a gesture of respect before sliding back into the floor. The Xylarians erupted in a display of flashing colors that Craig took to be applause or astonishment. The human has passed the second trial, announced the leader, its skin a bright, impressed gold. Such an approach has never been attempted. Craig twirled the scepter experimentally. I just figured if it could sense fear, showing confidence might work better. Plus, it seemed like it was dancing with me rather than trying to kill me. The Guardian does not dance, corrected one of the council members sternly. It evaluates worthiness through confrontation. You chose harmony over combat, a most unusual strategy. Craig shrugged. Where I come from, not getting stabbed by giant jellyfish monsters is generally the preferred outcome. The Xylarians led him from the arena, murmuring among themselves. Their skin tones had shifted to thoughtful blues and curious greens. Craig noticed they were treating him with noticeably more respect, maintaining a formal distance and occasionally bowing their elongated heads. The third trial, announced the leader as they entered a new chamber, is the trial of judgment. This room was smaller and dominated by a circular table. Seated around it were 7 Xylarians wearing elaborate ceremonial attire. In the center of the table was a holographic display showing what appeared to be a 3-dimensional map of star systems. As ruler, you must arbitrate disputes and allocate resources wisely, explained the leader. Before you is a territorial conflict between our colony worlds. You must render judgment that satisfies all parties. Craig approached the table cautiously. The 7 Xylarians regarded him with skepticism, their skin tones a doubtful mix of grays and muted purples. Each representative will present their claim, continued the leader. Listen carefully, for the prosperity of millions depends on your decision. What followed was 2 hours of the most mind-numbingly complex territorial disputes Craig had ever encountered. The representatives spoke of resource extraction rights on gas giants, migratory patterns of space-dwelling organisms, and ancient claims dating back thousands of cycles. Their arguments were filled with references to Xylarian legal precedents and cultural traditions Craig couldn't possibly understand. By the end, his head was spinning. The representatives looked at him expectantly, their skin flickering with impatient orange pulses. Right, Craig said, standing up straight. I've heard all your arguments, and I've come to a decision. The room fell silent. Even the leader seemed tense, its central eye fixed unblinkingly on Craig. None of you got what you want, Craig declared. The representative's skin flashed with shock and outrage. One began to protest, but Craig held up his hand. Let me finish. None of you get exactly what you want because you're all thinking too small. These aren't 7 separate problems. It's one interconnected system. Craig reached into the holographic display, surprised to find he could manipulate it with his hands. He began rearranging the territorial boundaries, creating a new pattern. Instead of dividing everything into exclusive territories, you establish a cooperative zone here. In the center, he explained, highlighting a region where several claim lines intersected. Joint administration, shared resources, divided profits based on population needs rather than historical claims. The representatives stared at the modified map, their skin cycling through colors as they processed his proposal. This is unorthodox, said one finally. It violates 17 traditional boundary principles, added another, sounding scandalized. But, said a third slowly, its skin settling into a contemplative blue, the efficiency metrics would increase by at least 22% under this model. And no single colony bears a disproportionate burden, noted a fourth. The leader watched as the representatives began discussing the proposal amongst themselves, their initial outrage giving way to reluctant consideration. Their skin gradually shifted to more receptive hues. The human has offered a solution no Zalarian would have proposed, the leader observed. It is neither traditional nor expected, yet it may be effective. Sometimes you need an outside perspective, Craig said. I don't know your traditions or your history, which means I'm not limited by them either. After much discussion, the representatives reached a consensus. They turned to Craig, their skin now glowing with a uniform shade of approving turquoise. We accept this judgment, they declared in unison. The leader's skin flashed with a brilliant gold. The third trial is complete. The human has demonstrated wisdom beyond expectation. Craig was beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, he was getting the hang of this whole alien trial thing. As they led him from the chamber, he noticed the Xylarians were now keeping a respectful distance, some even bowing as he passed. Just one trial remains, announced the leader as they approached an ornate doorway inscribed with symbols that seemed to shift and change as Craig looked at them. The trial of compassion, the most sacred and demanding of all. The doors swung open to reveal a small, austere room. In the center was what appeared to be an aquarium containing a small, gelatinous creature that pulsed with a weak light. It was no larger than Craig's hand and looked vaguely like a translucent starfish with too many arms. This is a juvenile Chulari, explained the leader solemnly. The last of its kind. Its homeworld was destroyed in the great stellar collapse. It is dying. Craig approached the container cautiously. The tiny creature trembled, its light flickering feebly. What am I supposed to do? He asked. You must decide its fate, replied the leader. The Chulari was once a mighty species that warred with the Xylarians. Our ancestors considered them dangerous adversaries. Some still believe they should be allowed to go extinct, removing a potential threat forever. Craig looked at the tiny, helpless creature. But it's just a baby. It hasn't warred with anyone. The capacity for violence is in its genetic memory, said one of the council members. If nurtured to adulthood, it could potentially threaten Zalarian security again. So this is a test of whether I'd eliminate a potential future threat? Craig asked, frowning. It is a test of how you balance security against compassion, corrected the leader. The mark of a true ruler. Craig studied the small creature. Its movements were growing weaker, its light dimming. Without intervention, it would die soon. He thought about the decision before him, pragmatic security versus compassion for a helpless being. Without hesitation, Craig reached into the container and gently lifted the Chulari. It felt cool and delicate in his hands, like holding liquid silk. The creature responded to his touch, its light briefly glowing stronger. I don't know how to save it, Craig admitted, but I know letting it die is wrong. No species should go extinct because of fear of what they might become. The Xylarians watched silently as Craig cradled the creature. Then, to his surprise, the leader approached and produced a small vial containing an iridescent liquid. "This is the nectar of the eternal bloom," explained the leader. "It can sustain the Chulari until it reaches maturity. We have always possessed the means to save it." "Then why?" Craig began. "Because many rulers would choose security over compassion," interrupted the leader. "They would allow the extinction of a potential threat rather than risk the unknown future. The trial is not whether you could save it, but whether you would try." Craig carefully applied the nectar to the Chulari. Almost immediately, its light grew stronger, its movements more vigorous. The creature wrapped one of its delicate appendages around Craig's finger in what felt strangely like gratitude. "The human has passed the final trial," announced the leader, its skin glowing with a reverent white light. "All 4 qualities of rulership have been demonstrated. The prophecy is fulfilled." The Xylarians in the chamber knelt in unison, their skin rippling with waves of gold and silver. Craig stood awkwardly, still holding the rejuvenated Chulari, unsure of what came next. He didn't have to wonder long. The leader approached bearing an ornate crown that seemed to be made of living metal, constantly shifting and reforming itself. "Craig, Marshal of Earth," intoned the leader solemnly, "you have proven yourself worthy through the trials of ascension. You shall now be crowned king of the Xylarian dominion, ruler of the 7 spiral arms, protector of the thought matrix, and guardian of the eternal flame." Craig swallowed hard. That's a lot of titles for someone who was hitchhiking on a highway just hours ago. "The prophecy cares not for your previous station," replied the leader. "It recognizes only potential and worthiness." As the crown was placed upon his head, Craig felt a strange sensation, as if his mind was suddenly expanding, connecting to something vast and ancient. Knowledge and awareness flooded into him: the history of the Xylarians, the geography of their domain, the complex politics of their interstellar empire. "The crown of consciousness links you to the thought matrix," explained the leader. "The wisdom of all past rulers is now accessible to you." Craig staggered slightly under the weight of the information pouring into his mind. "This is overwhelming." "You will adjust," assured the leader. "The crown recognizes your human limitations and will moderate the flow of knowledge accordingly." The Xylarians rose and began a strange, undulating chant that made the air vibrate. Craig stood in the center of it all, trying to process how drastically his life had changed in the span of a few hours. "So," he said when the chanting finally subsided, "what happens now? Do I get a palace or something?" The leader's skin rippled with what might have been amusement. "You shall have the royal habitat, yes. But first, there is the matter of the cosmic threat." Craig blinked. "I'm sorry, the what now?" "The reason we invoked the prophecy of the outsider," explained the leader gravely. "Our civilization faces extinction from the approaching void leviathans. Our scientists predict they will reach our core worlds within 30 rotations." "Void leviathans," Craig repeated flatly. "And those would be ancient entities that consume stellar matter and all life within their path. They have destroyed 17 civilizations before ours. Our weapons cannot harm them. Our shields cannot repel them." Craig stared at the leader. "So you kidnapped me from Earth, put me through 4 trials, and made me your king because you're facing unstoppable cosmic monsters and figured, why not try the random human?" The leader's skin flushed a defensive purple. "The prophecy states that only the outsider king can lead us through the time of greatest peril. Our most sacred texts are quite specific." Craig sighed deeply. "Well, that would have been good information to have up front." "Would you have agreed to the trials had you known the true scale of the responsibility?" asked the leader. "Absolutely not," Craig admitted. "But since I'm apparently king now, I suppose I'd better take a look at these void leviathan things." The Xylarians led Craig to what he now understood was the command center of their massive mothership. The view screen showed a region of space where stars seemed to be disappearing, consumed by enormous shadows that defied visual definition. "Well," Craig said after studying the display, "that's terrifying." The Zalarian High Command gathered around him, their skin displaying anxious patterns of green and gray. "The previous king ordered our civilization to flee, but the Leviathans move faster than our fastest ships. Evacuation is impossible." Craig frowned, accessing the knowledge provided by the Crown. Information about Zalarian weapons systems, defensive capabilities, and scientific understanding flowed into his consciousness. None of it seemed adequate against the threat they faced. Then a strange thought occurred to him. "Have you ever tried communicating with them?" The Zylarians exchanged bewildered glances. "The Void Leviathans are not sentient beings," explained the science minister. "They are cosmic forces of destruction, like living black holes." "How do you know?" pressed Craig. "Have you tried?" "Our sensors detect no communication signals from them," replied the minister. Craig scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Not all communication is through signals we'd recognize. The Chulari communicated with me through touch and light. Maybe the Leviathans use some form we haven't considered." The science minister's skin flickered with skepticism. Even if they were sentient, our languages would have nothing in common. Communication would be impossible. "Music," Craig said suddenly, an idea forming. "Music is mathematical. It follows patterns that might be universally recognizable. If these things respond to rhythm or harmony." The Zylarians stared at him as if he'd gone mad. Nevertheless, they were bound to obey their new king. Craig instructed them to modify their long-range communication arrays to broadcast mathematical sequences expressed as musical patterns toward the approaching Leviathans. Days passed with no response. The Void Leviathans continued their inexorable approach, now visible to the naked eye as vast, shadowy forms against the starfield. The Zalarian population was on the verge of panic. Craig was beginning to think his idea had failed when the sensors detected something unusual. The Leave Leviathan had altered its course slightly, not enough to miss their system, but enough to indicate a deliberate change. "They heard us," Craig realized. "They're responding." He ordered the broadcast modified, incorporating elements of Zalarian harmonics and, on a whim, some Earth music he remembered, a mix of classical Bach and, somewhat embarrassingly, the pop music that had been playing on his car radio when he was abducted. The response was immediate and dramatic. The Void Leviathans changed formation, arranging themselves in a pattern that mirrored the mathematical structure of the music. Then, to everyone's astonishment, they began emitting their own music, gravitational waves that created patterns detectable by Zalarian instruments. "They're singing back to us," gasped the science minister, its skin a shocked white. The Zalarian linguists and mathematicians worked frantically to decode the patterns. Slowly, understanding emerged. The Void Leviathans weren't mindless destroyers. They were ancient migratory beings following cosmic currents of dark matter. They hadn't realized smaller species inhabited the systems they passed through, perceiving stellar matter as simply part of their natural feeding grounds. Through continued musical exchange, Craig managed to negotiate a slight adjustment to their path, enough to spare the Zalarian core worlds while still allowing the Leviathans access to uninhabited star systems for feeding. As the crisis resolved, Craig found himself regarded with awe bordering on worship by his new subjects. Songs were composed about King Craig the Harmonizer, who spoke to the void and brought peace where war would have meant annihilation. Months passed, and Craig settled into his role as Zalarian king with surprising ease. The crown's connection to the thought matrix helped him navigate the complexities of alien politics and culture. He instituted reforms, established diplomatic relations with neighboring species, including finding a sanctuary where the Chulari could be reintroduced, and even learned to control his skin tone when the Zylarians gifted him with a ceremonial bioadaptive suit that mimicked their color-changing abilities. One evening, as Craig sat in his royal chambers overlooking the capital city with its towering crystal spires and atmospheric light gardens, The leader of what was now his advisory council approached. "You have transformed our civilization, King Craig," it said, its skin glowing with respectful blue. The prophecy was indeed wise. Craig smiled. "I still think kidnapping random humans is a terrible selection process for monarchs, but I'm glad it worked out." "There is one matter we have never discussed," the advisor said hesitantly. "Do you wish to return to Earth? Our technology could easily transport you back to the moment you were taken. No time would have passed there." Craig considered the question seriously. He thought about his life on Earth, the dead-end job, the overdue bills, the lonely apartment where even his cat seemed disappointed in him. Then he looked out at the spectacular alien cityscape, thought of the worlds he'd helped save and the civilizations he now guided. "You know," he said finally, "I think my car's probably been towed by now anyway. Might as well stay where I'm appreciated." The advisor's skin rippled with relieved gold. "A wise decision, Your Majesty." But Craig added with a mischievous smile, "I do have one royal command that must be obeyed." "Anything, sire." "I want a cat. A regular Earth cat. If I'm going to be king of an advanced alien civilization, I at least want a pet that might actually like me this time." The advisor's skin flickered with confusion, but it bowed deeply. "As you command, so shall it be done." And that is how Craig Marshall, former graphic designer and reluctant hitchhiker, became not only king of the Zalarian Dominion, but also the first monarch in galactic history to establish an official royal position for a cat named Lieutenant Whiskers. First feline of the 7 spiral arms and, unlike his predecessor on Earth, a pet who actually seemed to enjoy Craig's company, especially after he introduced the Zylarians to the concept of gourmet fish-based cat treats, which became the Empire's most valuable trading commodity with 3 neighboring star systems. Sometimes, Craig reflected as he sat on his crystalline throne with Lieutenant Whiskers purring on his lap, the worst day of your life can unexpectedly become the beginning of the best.